I still remember the smell of roses that afternoon, hundreds of white roses arranged just the way Hannah wanted lining the marble staircase of the Fairmont Austin. The florists were adjusting centerpieces. The string quartet rehearsed in the courtyard. The air buzzed with the kind of excitement weddings tend to bring. Except for me, it was dread. I was standing there in 4-inch navy heels dressed in an emerald gown I had picked weeks ago to match the wedding theme. My makeup was flawless, my hair curled to perfection. Everything about me screamed that I belonged there. I didn't. "Hi, Lauren Whitaker," I said, smiling at the man holding the guest list on a tablet. "I'm the groom's sister." He paused, his fingers gliding down the screen. Then again, his smile faltered. "I'm sorry, I don't see your name here." I blinked. That can't be right. Maybe check under Whitaker or Derek Whitaker's party. He shook his head slowly. "I've checked both. You're not on the list." For a moment, I stood completely still, like maybe if I didn't move, this moment wouldn't be real. Behind him, guests were streaming into the venue, laughing, hugging, taking selfies in front of the gold-lettered welcome board. A board I had designed. Before I could say anything else, I saw my mother approaching from inside. Elaine Whitaker, elegant in her satin champagne-colored gown, her signature pearls, and that permanent air of being just slightly above everyone around her. "What's the issue here?" she asked smoothly, like she already knew the answer. "They say I'm not on the guest list," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. She didn't flinch. Didn't even pretend to be surprised. "Oh, honey," she said, "and I'll never forget this. Did you really think you were invited? This day isn't about you. Let's not make a scene. Strangers aren't allowed in." I didn't cry. Not then. Not in front of her. I smiled, calm and cold, and said quietly, "Then I'll live like a stranger." And I turned around and walked out of the wedding I had practically built from the ground up. I know, it sounds dramatic, unreal, but it happened. My name is Lauren Whitaker. I'm 30 years old, and this is the story of how I was erased from my own family, of how I spent years trying to earn love to prove I was worthy to show up for people who never really saw me at all. If you've ever bent over backward for family who only called you when they needed something, if you've ever felt invisible in a room full of people who are supposed to love you, then you might understand why this story needs to be told. So before I take you back to where this all began, let me ask, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. And if you've ever had to walk away from family just to find yourself, hit that like button and subscribe. Because today, I'm finally telling the whole truth. Looking back, I think I always knew I didn't quite belong in my own family. Not in a dramatic, orphan on the doorstep kind of way. No, it was more subtle than that. Quieter. Like a room you're allowed to enter but never really feel at home in. We grew up just outside Austin, Texas, in a quiet neighborhood where everyone knew everyone. Brick houses with wide porches, kids riding bikes till sunset, and Friday night football at the high school stadium. From the outside, we looked like the kind of family you'd want to be part of. Inside, though, it was a different story. My mom, Elaine, was the type who believed in image. Appearances meant everything. Her hair was always styled, her clothes perfectly pressed, and she spoke in this tone that made even compliments sound like subtle insults. My dad, Michael, was softer, an engineer who loved jazz records and black coffee. He was the kind of person who showed love in little ways, fixing your broken bike before you noticed taping a sticky note with "good luck" on your lunchbox. And then there was Derek. Derek was 3 years younger than me and the sun around which our family orbit revolved. Mom adored him. Dad, well, he tried to balance things, but Derek had this way of taking up all the air in the room. Even as kids, he was the center of every photo, every story. If he got a B on a test, it was, he's doing his best. If I got an A, it was, well, of course she did. I learned early that success didn't mean much unless Derek was struggling, and that any praise I got was always followed by, "Let's not make your brother feel bad, okay?" It wasn't just school. It was birthdays, holidays, every moment in between. On my 12th birthday, I remember asking for a simple cake with sunflowers on it. I got one with sports balls. Because Derek didn't like flowers. When I mentioned it, Mom just laughed. Don't be difficult, Lauren. It's just a cake. When I turned 16, I saved up for 6 months to buy myself a second-hand Canon camera. Photography was something I fell in love with, something that made me feel seen in a strange way. I'd spend hours capturing shadows, reflections, little moments no one else noticed. Derek once grabbed it and dropped it during a backyard football game. It cracked. I cried. "You're too sensitive," Mom said, shaking her head. "It was an accident. Don't make your brother feel guilty." That phrase became a kind of poison in our house. Don't make Derek feel bad. As if his comfort mattered more than my pain. But the real shift came when I was 19 and Dad died. Heart attack. Sudden. One moment he was in the kitchen making grilled cheese, the next he was on the floor. I was the one who called 911. I still remember the way his fingers curled toward me trying to reach. After that, something hardened in our home. Mom went from controlling to cold, and Derek, well, he spiraled. Dropped out of college, slept all day, partied all night, and guess who picked up the pieces? Me. I helped him find a job, drove him to interviews, let him crash on my couch, paid his phone bill when Mom needed to teach him responsibility. And still, she looked at me like I was just doing what was expected. Like being the responsible one was my role, not a choice, not a sacrifice. "You've always been so independent, Lauren," she'd say. But it wasn't a compliment. It was an excuse. An excuse to not ask me how I was doing. An excuse to leave me out. So when Derek got engaged to Hannah, the sweet, polished girl from Dallas with the rich family and perfect teeth, I thought maybe, just maybe, this was the moment things would shift. That this time, I'd be seen. Included. Appreciated. But I should have known. In our family, Derek's world always came first. And I was just the set designer, never part of the cast. I still remember the day Derek told me he was proposing. He showed up at my apartment unannounced, holding a little velvet box and grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. "I'm gonna ask Hannah to marry me," he said, dropping onto my couch like it was his own. He opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring, nothing subtle about it. Hannah's taste, of course. Expensive. Loud. "That's... wow," I said, honestly stunned. "When are you doing it, next weekend?" "I've already planned everything. Private rooftop dinner, string lights, the whole thing." I offered him a real smile then. For all our differences, I did love my brother. I wanted him to be happy. "I'm happy for you," I said, and I meant it. "Thanks, Lore," he replied, softening. "I know I haven't said it, but you've always been there for me. I don't forget that." That moment stuck with me. Maybe this time things would be different. Maybe this would be a turning point for us. A few weeks later, the engagement was official. There were Instagram posts, champagne toasts, dinner with Hannah's family in Dallas. My invitation to that dinner, it never came. "It was just close family," Mom explained. "I am close family," I wanted to say. But I didn't. Instead, I offered what I always did: help. I could assist with the wedding, I said during Sunday dinner at Mom's house. "You know, planning, organizing. It's what I do for a living." Mom raised an eyebrow. "That might be helpful if you're not too busy." Derek chimed in. "Honestly, that'd be amazing. We're already overwhelmed." Hannah smiled politely. "You're an event coordinator, right?" "I am," I said. "Well, if you could handle the invitations and venue coordination, that would really take the pressure off." They said it like they were doing me a favor, but I took it. Because somewhere deep down, I still believed that maybe if I poured myself into this wedding, they'd finally see me, appreciate me. Maybe this was the thing that would bridge the years of distance and dismissal. I threw myself into the work. I booked the Fairmont Austin months in advance, using my industry contacts to get them a price no one else could. I sourced florists, menu vendors, string quartets. I negotiated deals, paid deposits out of my own savings when Derek said he was between paychecks. I designed the entire aesthetic color palette, fonts, floral arrangements, table settings. I hand-drew a monogram for their initials that Hannah ended up using on everything: the napkins, the menus, the welcome signs. Every meeting, every late-night phone call, every revision, I handled it all, without complaint, without billing them, because in my heart this was my offering, my way of saying, "See, I matter too." And for a while it even felt good. Mom started calling me more, not to check in, but to delegate. "Can you follow up with the caterer again? Hannah wants the flowers a little more blush than ivory. Have you finished the table cards yet?" I said yes. Every time. Because in those moments I was needed. And being needed felt close enough to being loved. One night, as I was finalizing the guest list spreadsheet Hannah had sent me, I noticed something strange. There were 217 names. Friends, colleagues, extended family. Hannah's college sorority sisters. Derek's poker buddies. But one name was missing. Mine. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe I'd be added later. Maybe it was an oversight. I didn't bring it up. I didn't want to sound paranoid. Instead, I doubled down. I spent weekends creating custom table numbers with pressed wildflowers between sheets of acrylic. I hand-assembled the wedding favors, locally made candles wrapped in ribbon that matched the bridesmaid dresses. Every detail was perfect. Every detail, except the one that should have mattered most. The closer we got to the wedding, the more I started to feel invisible. Not ignored exactly, just omitted. Quietly, casually. It started with the wedding website. I had created it myself, of course, clean layout, soft beige tones, delicate florals. I added a section titled Our Story, filled in the text Hannah had sent me, and a family page with photos of both families. When I previewed the site before publishing, I paused. There were photos of Hannah's parents, her siblings, even her grandmother. Derek's baby photos are Mom looking proud beside him at his college graduation. But there wasn't a single picture of me. And not just no photo, my name wasn't mentioned at all. I stared at the screen for a long time, wondering if I was overreacting. Maybe it was an oversight. Maybe they were still deciding which pictures to use. I brought it up gently during a call with Derek. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "I noticed I'm not on the family section of the site." "Oh, weird," he replied, distracted. "I'll let Hannah know. Probably just a mix-up." But weeks passed and nothing changed. Still no photo. Still no mention. Then came the bridal shower. I wasn't invited. When I found out through a tagged photo on Instagram, I asked Mom about it. "Oh, that was just something Hannah's bridesmaids threw together," she said. "You're not really in that group, Lauren." Right, not in the group. I kept telling myself I was being too sensitive. That the real show of love was in the trust they had in me to make everything beautiful. That's what I told myself. Until the RSVP list started rolling in. I had designed the invitation's ivory cardstock with gold-foiled edges and letterpress fonts. They were elegant, romantic, expensive, and I hadn't received one. It felt silly to bring it up considering I had personally mailed most of them. But still, I asked Mom during one of our calls. "I know it sounds dumb," I said, laughing awkwardly, "but I never got an invitation. I kind of wanted one to keep, you know." There was a pause. "Oh," she said, "I think Derek and Hannah assumed you didn't need one, since you know you're involved in all the planning." Sure. Of course. I was involved. So involved I wasn't included. When I asked Hannah directly about it, she gave me the same vague smile she always did. "Your family, Lauren. You don't need an invitation to your own brother's wedding." That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. It felt like a sentence with an asterisk. Then came the seating chart. 6 weeks before the wedding, I received the final table assignments to build the large printed board that would greet guests at the entrance. I designed it with care-muted floral background, matching the rest of the aesthetic, printed in a lovely calligraphy font. After everything was formatted and laid out, I did one final scan. And my name wasn't on it. I checked twice, 3 times, searched every table, looked for a placeholder. A maybe. Nothing. I stared at the screen, heart racing. Then I called Derek. "I just finished the seating chart," I said. "I'm not listed anywhere." There was silence on the other end. Then, "Oh, yeah. Hannah and Mom thought you'd be running around too much to sit and eat anyway. You'll be busy coordinating, right?" "No," I said carefully. "I'm not the wedding coordinator. You hired someone for that. I was just helping with the design." Right, he muttered. "I'll talk to them. Maybe we can seat you with some of Hannah's college friends or something." Somehow that stung even more. I wasn't family. I wasn't in the bridal party. I wasn't even a guest. I was just a piece of the machine, a worker bee. And still, I kept going. I convinced myself that on the wedding day, everything would come together. They would see what I'd done, feel grateful, maybe even proud. Maybe finally they would look at me and say, "We couldn't have done this without you." Hope is a stubborn thing. It clings even when it has no business hanging on. The morning of the wedding, I woke up before the sun. My apartment was still dark, the city quiet. I made a pot of strong coffee and stood by the window in my robe, looking out over Austin's skyline, trying to breathe through the knot in my chest. It should have been a happy day. My brother was getting married. I had worked tirelessly to bring his vision to life. Everything should have been perfect. And still, something didn't feel right. I checked my bag for the 10th time, seating chart printouts, extra place cards, ribbon tape, safety pins, double-sided adhesive, even backup copies of the menu just in case. I looked like a wedding planner, but I wasn't. I was just the sister. A title that by now felt hollow. I slipped into my gown, the emerald green one I had spent more than I could afford on. It was tailored to fit like a glove, elegant but not attention-seeking. I curled my hair, did my makeup, wore the earrings my dad gave me for my 18th birthday. I sent a quick text to Derek, "Big day. Everything's going to be beautiful. Love you." No response. Fine, I thought. He's busy. By 10 a.m., I was pulling into the Fairmont's valet entrance. The lobby was already bustling, florists with carts of arrangements, photographers snapping test shots, staff setting up the ballroom. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and walked in. I approached a woman with a clipboard, clearly the venue coordinator. "Hi," I said. "I'm Lauren Whitaker. I've been handling the design elements for today, just checking if there's anything that still needs attention." She looked up, blinked, and then gave a polite smile. "Oh, I thought you were just managing things remotely. Hannah didn't mention you'd be on site." "I'm Derek's sister," I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "Right," she said, nodding, then glanced back at her clipboard. "Everything looks good. Floral signage programs all here. You really did a great job." "Thanks," I said, but I already felt that familiar chill. I headed upstairs, hoping to catch a quick moment with Hannah or my mom. I could hear music and laughter behind the suite door. The bridesmaids were getting ready. I knocked. It was opened by one of Hannah's friends. I'd met her twice, briefly. She blinked in surprise. "Oh, hey. Lauren, right?" "Yeah." I smiled. "Just wanted to see if anyone needed anything." Before she could respond, my mom appeared behind her, elegant and composed in her satin dress. "Lauren," she said, stepping into the hallway and pulling the door shut behind her. "I came to make sure everything was on track," I said. "Just wanted to pop in." "She's very stressed right now," Mom interrupted, keeping her voice low and firm. "Let's not add to the chaos. Maybe you could help check the place settings downstairs." I nodded, swallowing the hurt. "Sure," I said quietly. As I turned to leave, I heard Hannah's voice behind the door. "Is she gone? I don't need any drama today." I didn't stop walking. The ballroom was stunning. My designs were everywhere, from the monogrammed cocktail napkins at the bar to the elegant programs laid out on every ceremony chair. It was beautiful. I had made it beautiful, but no one acknowledged me. No one asked why I was sitting alone in the back row during the ceremony. No one noticed that I didn't stand for family portraits. And then came the moment I'd been dreading without knowing why: the reception. Guests were lining up at the entrance to the ballroom, giving their names to the staff holding digital tablets. I slipped into line, rehearsing what I'd say when the inevitable happened. When it was my turn, I smiled. Lauren Whitaker. The young man scrolled, then scrolled again. His smile faded. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't see that name on the list." I tried to stay calm. "I'm the groom's sister." He looked uncomfortable. "Let me check with the coordinator." He stepped aside and whispered to the same clipboard woman. She looked at me once, then frowned. She approached. "There's been a bit of confusion," she said. "You're not on the approved guest list." "That can't be right," I said. "I designed everything. I've been here all morning." "We're grateful for your design work," she said, "but we can only admit names pre-cleared by the bride and her mother." And then, like a cruel stage cue, my mom appeared beside her. "What's going on here?" she asked, irritation in her voice. "They say I'm not on the guest list," I said, fully expecting her to fix it. Instead, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Lauren, did you really think you were invited? Strangers aren't allowed in?" It was like the floor fell out from under me. "Strangers. I'm your daughter," I whispered. "Derek's sister." "You haven't really been part of this family in a long time," she said coldly. And Madison didn't want any awkwardness today. That's when I knew. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake. They had planned this. I stood there stunned, humiliated, my entire body burning with shame. But I didn't cry. Not there. I looked her in the eyes and said, "Then I'll live like a stranger." And I walked away. I walked past the marble columns, past the gold-lettered welcome sign I had designed, past the guests sipping champagne. I walked out of that wedding and out of that family with my head held high, even if inside I was shattered. The hotel doors closed behind me with a heavy thud. Outside, the sun had started to dip, casting a warm glow over the parking lot. I stood there for a moment, frozen. There I was, in a dress I had carefully chosen, with makeup perfectly done, holding a clutch filled with extra programs, safety pins, and breath mints for a party I wasn't welcome at. I had nowhere to go, and I didn't know what to do next. My car was parked way out near the edge of the lot. The emerald green heels I had convinced myself were surprisingly comfortable had already begun to dig into the bones of my feet. I took a few steps, then stopped. The pain, emotional, physical, just hit all at once. I turned and saw a stone bench near a decorative fountain and made my way to it, sinking down as the last bit of strength drained from my body. And that's when the tears came. Not delicate movie scene tears. Not the kind you dab at with a tissue while still looking composed. No. These were ugly, wrenching sobs. The kind that come from a place so deep you don't even know how long they've been waiting to escape. I sat there alone in that ridiculously expensive dress, mascara running while the sound of the fountain gurgled behind me. People walked past, late guests, valet attendants, delivery drivers. No one stopped. No one asked if I was okay, which felt weirdly fitting. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called the only person I knew wouldn't make me feel like a burden. "Megan," I said, when she picked up my voice barely above a whisper. "Can you come get me?" That's all it took. "I'm already grabbing my keys," she said. "Where are you?" While I waited, I sat in silence and let the memories flood in. The birthdays where my mom forgot to buy a gift. The school plays where Derek got the biggest cheer even though I had the lead. The time I got into my dream college and Mom said, "But who's going to help with Derek's move-in next week?" 1,000 moments, all pointing to the same truth I had refused to fully face. I was never going to be enough for them. Not because I wasn't good, but because they never wanted me to be. When Megan pulled up, she barely gave me time to stand before she was out of the car and wrapping her arms around me. "You're shaking," she said into my hair. "I think I just got disowned," I said, trying to laugh but choking on the sound. "No," she said firmly. "They don't get to decide that. You're not theirs to throw away." She brought me home to her place, wrapped me in a giant hoodie and handed me tea and tissues and silence. Not the awkward kind, the healing kind, the kind that says, "You don't need to explain. I already see you." That night, I slept in her guest room still wearing my emerald dress because I didn't have the energy to take it off. And when I woke up the next morning, I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't check to see if Derek had texted. I didn't call Mom. Instead, I just lay there, letting myself feel it all. The grief, the anger, the deep aching loss not just of a wedding but of a fantasy I had clung to my whole life. The idea that maybe someday if I did enough, gave enough, was good enough, they would finally love me the way I needed them to. It wasn't true. It had never been true. And now, for the first time, I was done pretending. I spent the next 3 days holed up in Megan's guest room. She brought me meals I barely touched, checked in with soft knocks. Let me cry. Let me not cry. She didn't push. She just held space, something my own family never seemed able to do. On the 4th morning, she walked in, opened the blinds, and said gently but firmly, "You're going to see someone today." I blinked. Someone. A therapist. Dr. Jacobs. She had a cancellation and can see you at 2 o'clock. I opened my mouth to argue, to say I was fine, to say I didn't need that, but the words didn't come. I wasn't fine. And deep down, I knew it. "I don't know what I'd even say," I muttered. "Start with what happened at the wedding," she said. "Or with your mom. Or Derek. Or start with how you feel like a ghost who's been haunting her own family for years." That last part hit too hard, because that was exactly how I felt. Dr. Jacobs's office wasn't what I expected. No sterile white walls or cold furniture. It felt like a cozy reading room, soft lighting, warm wood shelves filled with books and plants. She was in her early 50s with silver streaks in her hair and eyes that looked at you like she could see through all your armor but wouldn't touch it until you were ready. We talked. Or rather, I talked. She listened. About the wedding, about the months I spent working on it, about not being invited, about how calm my mother was, how cruel that calmness felt, about all the times in my life when I gave everything and still came up empty. When I finally stopped, she leaned forward and said, "What you've just described, it sounds like a pattern of emotional neglect and conditional love." I stared at her. "So I'm not crazy." She shook her head slowly, not even close. She explained something I'd never heard before: the golden child versus the scapegoat dynamic. In families where one child is idealized and the other is chronically dismissed, the golden child, in my case, Derek, is upheld no matter what. The scapegoat, me, becomes the emotional dumping ground. Not because they've done anything wrong, but because someone in the family system needs to carry the blame. They chose roles, she said. And once they did, they locked you both into them. But I was the one holding it all together, I said, my voice cracking. I planned the damn wedding. I paid for things. I worked so hard. Exactly, she nodded. And none of it changed your role. Because it was never about what you did. It was about who they needed you to be, the one they could ignore. I didn't realize I was crying until she handed me a tissue. "Why does it still hurt so much?" I whispered. "Even though I understand it now, why does it feel like I'm defective?" "Because the story was written over years," she said. "It got inside you. You were taught that love was something you had to earn. And when you didn't receive it, your brain told you it must have been your fault." I sat with that for a long time. No one had ever said it that plainly, that clearly. It wasn't me. It was never me. Over the next few weeks, I kept seeing Dr. Jacobs, twice a week at first, then once. Each session peeled back another layer. The moments I dismissed as just how things were started to look like what they really were: systemic emotional minimization. I started journaling each morning, a few minutes of uncensored thought before I looked at my phone or talked to anyone. I started saying no to things I didn't want to do. I started breathing again, not just surviving breathing. One afternoon, Megan found me in her kitchen, laptop open, sketching out a new brand concept for an event client. She watched me quietly for a moment before saying, "You look lighter." I hadn't realized it until then, but I did. And for the first time in my life, it wasn't because someone else said I was good. It was because I was beginning to believe it myself. 1 month after the wedding, I moved. It wasn't dramatic, no packed truck and teary goodbye. Just me, 2 friends, and a lot of cardboard boxes. I left my old apartment behind without a second glance. That place had held too many memories of waiting for phone calls that never came, of designing things for people who barely said thank you. My new space was a small 1-bedroom in South Austin, older building, creaky floors, terrible parking. But it had light. Big open windows that caught the morning sun. A tiny balcony with room for 2 chairs and a potted herb garden I didn't know how to care for yet. I painted the walls a soft sage green, calming, grounded. Hung up art from local makers. And for the first time in a long time, I made every decision based on what I liked. Not what would impress a client. Not what would get my mom's rare nod of approval. Just me. I turned the second corner of the living room into a studio. 1/2 desk, 1/2 chaos, swatches of fabric, Pantone color books, mood boards. And then I did something terrifying. I quit my job. The agency I worked for had been fine. The people were nice. The projects were interesting. But every time I looked at our client list, I saw one name that haunted me: Whitaker Reynolds Wedding Event Brand Package. It was a reminder I didn't need anymore. So I handed in my notice and started my own studio. Small, scrappy, built from the ground up, but it was mine. Lauren Whitaker Creative, specializing in branding and design for small businesses, women-led startups, and people who wanted to make something honest. Something real. About 6 weeks into this new chapter, I was working from my usual spot, a quiet little coffee shop near my apartment with burnt orange walls and vintage postcards pinned to the corkboard. I was reviewing logo options for a new bakery client when I dropped my sketchbook. It landed, open pages fluttering, just as the man behind me bent down to hand it back. "These are yours?" he asked. He was holding it carefully like it was something fragile. His eyes flicked across the page, a row of hand-drawn logos and color mock-ups. "Yeah," I said. "Sorry, I'm clumsy before coffee." He smiled. "They're good." "You a designer?" "Something like that." He extended his hand. "I'm Jason, photographer, mostly interiors and architecture." I shook it. "Lauren, mostly chaos and deadlines." We ended up sharing a table, talked about clients, about color theory, about how bad Austin traffic had gotten. There was no pressure, no expectations, just 2 creative people talking about work and slowly about life. Before we left, he asked, "Would you want to grab a coffee again sometime? Or dinner? I'd love to see more of your work." And for once, I didn't overthink it. I didn't spiral into what ifs or whether I was ready. I just smiled and said, "Yeah, I'd like that." That night, back in my new apartment, I looked around at the boxes still half unpacked, the paint still drying in the corners. Everything felt uncertain. But also, for the first time in a long time, mine. I wasn't trying to be impressive. I wasn't trying to be needed. I was just becoming myself again. Or maybe for the first time, Thanksgiving was approaching. It used to be one of my favorite holidays before it became yet another stage where I played the thankless role of the responsible one. Cooking half the meal, coordinating place settings, showing up with wine no one drank, and stories no one asked to hear. Now it just made me anxious. Part of me expected my mom to pretend nothing had happened, to send a chirpy group text with a time and menu like we were still a functioning family. And right on cue, the email came. "Thanksgiving dinner at 3:00 p.m. Derek and Hannah will be there. I expect everyone to behave maturely and put this nonsense behind us. Family is family." That last line, "family is family," hit me like a slap. That phrase had always been used to justify everything. Every time she belittled me, every time Derek was prioritized, every time I was expected to show up and serve, no questions asked. And this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. So I sat down and wrote the hardest email I'd ever written. Not angry, not emotional, just honest. Subject: boundaries. Mom, Derek. Being excluded from the wedding after everything I contributed was not just hurtful, it was clarifying. I've spent most of my life trying to earn a place in this family, trying to be useful enough, helpful enough, quiet enough. And what I learned is that no amount of effort will change the role I was assigned, the one who supports, but doesn't belong. I need time and space away from this dynamic. For the next 3 months, I ask that you respect my request for no contact. After that, if I decide to resume communication, it will be under new terms. Terms that include mutual respect and emotional safety. This is not about punishment, it's about protection. I am no longer available to be the family's afterthought. I deserve better. And I'm finally ready to live like I believe that. Lauren. I didn't reread it. I didn't agonize over the wording. I just hit send. Then I turned off my phone and went for a walk. It was a warm fall afternoon in Austin. Leaves scattered across the sidewalks. Kids rode bikes through Zilker Park. People laughed on patios over overpriced lattes. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. When I turned my phone back on later that night, there were 7 missed calls. 3 from Mom, 2 from Derek, and 2 voicemails. I didn't listen to them. I didn't need to. I could already hear their voices in my head. You're being dramatic. This isn't how we solve things in this family. You're hurting Derek. After everything we've done for you. But the truth is, what they had done for me was conditional. What I had done for them had been without conditions. And that contrast was no longer something I could live with. Thanksgiving came. I spent it with Meg and Jason and a few friends from my new neighborhood. We made too much food, burned the first batch of rolls, played board games after dessert, laughed until I forgot what day it even was. No guilt, no eggshells, no roles to play, just people showing up because they wanted to, not because they were obligated to. Jason, ever observant, watched me as I leaned back in my chair after our second round of pumpkin pie. "You're quiet," he said softly. "I'm okay," I replied. "It's strange not being with them today, but it's also peaceful." "That probably sounds awful." "No," he said. "It sounds honest." I didn't check social media until the next morning. When I did, I saw a photo posted by Hannah Derek, my mom, and her family around the Thanksgiving table. The caption read, "So grateful for our perfect little family. Perfect little family. Without me." And for once, that wasn't a wound. It was proof. Proof that walking away had been the right decision. Proof that I wasn't imagining it. Proof that I didn't belong, not because I wasn't enough, but because they never wanted to make space. And now I was making space for myself. The first time I realized I hadn't thought about my mother in 3 whole days, I was standing in my kitchen laughing. Jason had just told me a terrible joke, the kind so bad it looped back around to being funny. I was doubled over, dish towel in one hand, pie filling on the counter behind me, and it hit me like a soft shock. I felt light. I hadn't checked for texts, hadn't replayed old conversations in my head, hadn't braced myself for a guilt trip, a veiled dig of familiar silence. I was just there, in that moment, fully present, fully myself. And for the first time in my adult life, that self didn't feel like something broken I needed to fix. Lauren Whitaker Creative, my studio, was thriving. What started as a shaky leap became a real business, designing logos, brand kits, packaging for women-led startups, indie bookstores, small bakeries, clients who said thank you and actually meant it, people who respected boundaries, who paid invoices on time, who valued my work not just because it looked good, but because it meant something. My portfolio got picked up in a local design blog, and from there, inquiries came in faster than I could schedule discovery calls. And every time someone said, "I love your style," or "You really get what I'm trying to say," I felt a little more rooted, a little more real. Jason and I kept seeing each other. sometimes for client projects, sometimes just for long walks around Ladybird Lake, or cooking dinners in his apartment while jazz played in the background. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He was just steady. He didn't shrink when I spoke up. He didn't flinch when I had off days. And when I told him one night lying on the floor after a late dinner about the wedding and the bench, and the sentence my mother had said to me, he didn't try to fix it. He just took my hand and said, "She's wrong, you know. You're not a stranger. You're unforgettable." And somehow I believed him. It wasn't perfect. There were still days I caught myself checking my phone out of old reflex. Still moments when I walked past a wedding dress boutique and felt that twinge not of jealousy, but of memory, of how hard I had tried to be seen. But those moments didn't define me anymore. They passed. Like weather. I let them come, and then I let them go. On the 1-year anniversary of the wedding, the one I wasn't invited to, I woke up early, made coffee, opened my laptop, and launched a passion project I'd been building quietly for months, a digital zine called Enough. Stories from women like me, creatives, caregivers, black sheep who had been told they were too much, or not enough, or both, depending on who was looking. Each page was a love letter to the version of ourselves we were finally allowed to become. I clicked publish. And instead of wondering what my mother would think, or whether Derek would roll his eyes, I texted Megan the link and wrote, "I think I'm ready to share it with the world." She replied with a single word, "Yes." Later that evening, Jason took me to a small rooftop restaurant downtown. We watched the sun dip below the Austin skyline, our plates' empty hands intertwined. "You know," he said, "when I first met you, you seemed held together, but heavy. Like you were carrying something huge in a tiny box." I smiled. "And now?" "Now," he said, "it's like you finally put it down." I didn't say anything. Just let the silence stretch warm and full between us. Because he was right. It happened on a Tuesday, late afternoon. I had just wrapped up a call with a new client, a therapist from Seattle, who wanted to rebrand her private practice when my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in over a year. "Derek." I stared at the screen for a long time. My thumb hovered over the red button, then the green, then back again. What did he want? Why now? Was I ready for this? Would I ever be? I picked up. "Hello?" There was a pause. Then, "Hey, it's me." His voice sounded different, tired, smaller. "I know it's been a while," he said. "I didn't know if you'd answer." "I almost didn't," I admitted. Another pause. Then, almost in a whisper, I messed up. I didn't say anything. I didn't rescue him from the silence. I just let it sit. He kept going. "Things with Hannah, they didn't last. She left 2 months ago. Said she felt like she married an image, not a person." I guess she was right. He exhaled. "I've been thinking about you. About what happened. I don't know how we let it get that far." I almost laughed. But I caught myself. This wasn't about rehashing blame. Not anymore. "I read your email again," he said. "The one you sent after the wedding. Back then I was angry. I thought you were just being dramatic. But now, I think I finally get it. Or at least I'm trying to." I closed my eyes. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't. He continued, "I've started seeing someone. A counselor. She asked me who in my life ever set boundaries I didn't respect. Your name came up immediately. That made me smile. A small one, but real. "Thanks for telling me," I said. "That couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," he admitted. "And I don't expect anything. I hope someday we can have coffee. Maybe start again. As adults. Not as those kids Mom decided we were." It was the first time I heard him acknowledge it. The roles. The damage, the loss. And he didn't ask me to fix it. He didn't ask me to forgive him. He just asked to try. I paused. "I think coffee could be a good place to start," I said. "But not today." "Of course," he replied quickly. "Whenever you're ready. Or never. I just needed to say it." "Thank you," I said. And I meant it. After we hung up, I sat in the window seat of my apartment watching the early evening light move across the floor. I didn't cry. I didn't feel shaken. I felt still, because I had finally reached the place I thought I never would. Peace, whether they changed or not. We did meet for coffee 2 weeks later. A quiet spot downtown. Public. Neutral. We talked about work. About Austin traffic. About Dad, the one person we both truly missed. He didn't apologize the way I once hoped he would. But he didn't defend himself either. He listened. And that was enough. Before we parted, he said, "Mom still thinks you'll come around eventually." I smiled, polite but distant. She might be waiting a long time. As I walked back to my car, a breeze caught the hem of my coat, and I thought, this is what closure feels like. Not fireworks, not fanfare. Just a quiet, steady door clicking shut behind you. And the road ahead wide open. Thanksgiving came around again. The second one since the wedding. But this time, I didn't wait for an invitation that wouldn't come. I hosted. My apartment wasn't big. The dining table was borrowed from Megan, the chairs a mismatched collection from Craigslist and neighbors. The oven overheated halfway through the turkey. Jason accidentally knocked over a bowl of cranberry sauce. Someone brought a vegan pie that no one touched. It was messy, loud, unfiltered. It was perfect. Around the table sat my chosen family, Megan, who had stood beside me when I couldn't stand for myself. Jason, who saw me not as a role to fill, but as a person to know. A few clients turned friends who had supported my studio from day one. A neighbor named Teresa who brought the best sweet potatoes I'd ever had. And me, at the head of the table. Not because I needed to prove anything, not because I had earned it, but because this was my home, my life. And I had built it brick by brick, boundary by boundary. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Jason and I sat on the floor with plates of leftovers and a bottle of wine. He nudged me gently. "You okay?" I said, surprised by how true it felt. I thought today might feel sad. But it didn't. Jason smiled. It's allowed to feel full, even when not everyone's at the table. I looked around the room, the half-lit candles, the stack of empty dessert plates, the pillow someone had dropped on the floor. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt full. Not just from food, from being enough. I used to think healing meant going back. To what was? To what could have been? To the family I kept hoping would finally welcome me in. But healing, it turns out, is about forward motion. It's about building something new, not because the old thing was meaningless, but because it wasn't meant to hold you forever. I still carry parts of that old version of me, the girl who tried too hard, who said yes when she wanted to scream no, who dressed up her pain in productivity and called it love. But now when she whispers old fears in my ear, I answer with something new. I hear you, but we're safe now. We don't have to go back. 1 week after Thanksgiving, I received a card in the mail. No return address. Just my name written in familiar looping script. Inside was a photograph, a black and white picture of me and my dad. I was maybe 7, holding a paper crown I'd made in school. He had one on too, smiling. Tucked behind the photo was a short note. "He always saw you. I hope you know that now." It wasn't signed, but I didn't need a name. I placed the photo on my desk next to my laptop. A reminder. Not of what I lost, but of what I had carried with me all along. And as I sat back in my chair, fingers poised above the keyboard ready to design something new, I whispered it once aloud. "I am not a stranger. I am home."